Testing, testing. Hello, everyone. Hello, welcome to MomoCon 2025. I am Trea Davenport, and I'm honored to lead this conversation today with someone whose childhood invention became a billion-dollar juggernaut and changed how we play, Dr. Lonnie Johnson. He's a NASA engineer, inventor of the Super Soaker, and founder of the Johnson STEM Activity Center. Today, we're going to dive deep into the science behind fun, the genius behind the gadgets, and the imagination that bridges STEM and fandom. Get ready to be inspired and maybe even surprised. Join me in welcoming the Dr. Lonnie Johnson, everyone. Yes, how awesome. Welcome, Dr. Johnson.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right, let's get started. So you created Super Soaker. Did you know that you were about to become a summertime legend, or did you think it was just another day in the lab?
Well, I thought it would be a lot of fun. I didn't expect it to become the huge hit that it did. Geez, my objective at the time, I wanted to become an independent inventor, and I needed some income to support myself while I worked on other inventions. And so Super Soaker was the first out of the box that really achieved some, commercial success. And that allowed me to become an independent inventor, which was my goal.
That's wonderful. So what was your first inkling that you had created a cultural phenomenon?
Well, I guess when I got my first, I had gotten some royalty checks. So I was in California at the time, and at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, working on outer-planetary systems, working on the Galileo mission at the time, actually. No, Cassini mission to Saturn at the time. And I left JPL when I got my initial royalty checks. It looked like I was going to have some income. I could support my family and everything. And then I decided to move back to Atlanta. And see, that was in 1990. Is that still, can you still hear me okay?
Now we can.
It's kind of shaky. Okay, it's back now.
Now we can.
Okay, so it wasn't until I moved to Atlanta and set up a home and everything, and I got my first, significant royalty check, and I knew my life had changed. But up until then, my objective was just to have enough income that I could work on some of my other inventions. So I've always been tinkering and working on ideas, and I felt that I would have a number of other inventions. I would like to share one thought, though, that's really, I think, significant in all of that. When you have an idea and you want to put it out there, you want to, sell your invention, make money, and so forth, there's always this fear as an inventor that someone's going to take your idea and run with it, right? Well, my decision at the time, I had that apprehension, but I decided, if I put that out there, the least that can happen is that I'll learn some things. I'll learn how it's done. Even if I lose, I'll learn. And I was willing to take that risk. I was willing to pay my tuition for the education that I would need to become successful. So I was willing to take the risk. So if you have an idea, don't be apprehensive. Put it out there. If it doesn't succeed, the next one will, because you'll learn from that experience and you'll be able to move forward. So I wanted to know how to carry things into commercialization, and that was part of my education.
So you were willing to take that risk?
Oh yeah, absolutely. When I first started, initially I wanted to manufacture the gun myself. I contacted some manufacturing companies that could make the plastic components and all of that, and actually set up an assembly line, and they told me that it was going to cost me $200,000 to get the first 1,000 guns off the production line. And I didn't have $200,000.
No, you're kidding.
And my simple math said, well, that's 1,000 guns, and it cost me $200,000. That's $200 a gun. And that didn't make sense either. Nobody's going to pay $200 a gun, and I still would not have made any profit. So it was clearly there's some things I didn't understand and needed to know. There were products in the stores that were, even more complicated than my gun, and they didn't cost $200. So since all of my professional jobs to that point had been government related. I'd worked in the Air Force for about 10 years on the B-2 bomber, and had spent time with NASA on the Galileo mission to Jupiter, and of course the Cassini mission to Saturn. And so that was my professional career. So, private business was not my thing, and so clearly I needed an education.
So let me ask you, what do you say to all of the nerds, the geeks, the thinkers, like the people who never fit in, but they have the potential to create something world-changing? Like, what do you say to them?
Oh, wow. Yeah. Jeez. It seems I'm sort of feel inadequate to say anything because you are the creators. I mean, it's obvious, just walking through the convention here and seeing all the great things that you're doing just with the costumes and all the various venues. I'm like, wow, this is just a center of creativity. It's just bulging with it. So there are lots of ideas, and pursue your dream is the only thing I can say, because you certainly have the drive. I see a lot of people in the audience here that I'm starting to recognize.
That's cool.
Some from my laboratory who actually work for me. So I see Eve over here, the robotics team. This is a grade school robotics team, and they compete in FIRST Robotics, and it's a very fun program. I'm very supportive of that because my science project when I was in high school, senior in high school, was a robot. I built this robot back in 1968. That was a fully remote control robot, and nobody had robots back then. And someone asked me, one of the students actually asked me in a very intelligent way, Dr. Johnson, what software that you use in your robot? And there was no software.
That's a great question, right?
It was a great question today, but back then, the computer in my robot was actually a mechanical computer. It was a series of relays and switches and things that could, it was a decoding system, but it was all mechanical. And it was electromagnets and things like that. And, I didn't have a computer software or anything like that. And certainly, as a high school student, didn't have access to anything that remotely resembled an electronic computer. They didn't exist back in the 60s.
So then I have to ask, because to many, and I observed you in the hallway, and you were like many people's hero. They were like, I have to talk to you. Oh my gosh, you're a hero to many people. Like, I need to know, like, who are some of your like sci-fi heroes or comic heroes, like growing up? Who did you look to?
Well, geez, you pull inspiration where you find it, and you see things that you identify with and you relate to, and you just pursue it. Now, when I was in school as a kid, of course, I watched a movie called Young Tom Edison. It was a black and white. Mickey Rooney was the lead actor. You probably never heard of Mickey Rooney. Some of the OGs in the room. But anyway, he was a kid who was an out of the box, and people always telling him things that he couldn't do, and then he was always curious and tinkering and doing things, and I related to him in a real way, because he always had these projects going and was always doing stuff that people were telling him wouldn't work or he couldn't do, and that was me. When I decided to build this robot, and I've been working on a lot of those small projects and things like that, but the LONNIE took me about a year to build. And think about that, as a high school student, without a mentor, without any guidance, no coaches or anything like that, I decided to build this robot. And so on my own, going to the library and reading up on control circuits and things like that, and just learning as you go. And as an example, one of the books that I got, because I wanted to be able to have a fully remote control robot. I didn't want to have wires running to him. I wanted to transmit signals to him so he could be really remote control. And so I got in this book about control circuits, and the transistors, I guess, were an evolving thing. This was in the 60s. Transistors were just starting to come online, and back then it was still vacuum tubes, and so they were manufacturing little miniature vacuum tubes. And so I built this circuit using these little miniature vacuum tubes and followed all the instructions. And then this last step was I had built the transmitter and receiver, and so the last instruction was to use a frequency analyzer to tune the transmitter and receiver to the same frequency. And I'm like, well, what's a frequency analyzer? I was stuck. And I didn't have a mentor or anybody in my sphere of contacts, and my parents didn't know. Nobody could tell me where to go to find a frequency analyzer or who would know what one was, so I was stuck. And so to solve my problem, I used my a walkie-talkie that one of my siblings had gotten for Christmas, so transmitter and receiver, and I hardwired one to receive and the other one to transmit, and then I could get the signals into the robot. And so it was that kind of problem solving, just not being deterred because of lack of knowledge, but finding ways around the obstacles that I would run into. So that's, basically that's the advice I give you. If you have an idea, you want to pursue it, push through all the obstacles, because there will be a lot of things that will say a lot of reasons to give up. But perseverance is what leads to success.
No, absolutely. So what do you think is like a consistent misconception about innovation?
Consistent that it's luck. It's not luck, it's perseverance. We're all blessed. When people tell me sometimes, you sure are lucky. Well, Lady Luck smiles frowns just as much as she smiles. In the end, she's kind of neutral. It's what you do that puts the odds in your favor that makes the difference. People are surprised to learn that I got the idea, from the time I got the idea for Super Soaker to the time that I actually got a deal and actually had water guns on the market was like 8 years. And then 2 years later, it was the #1 selling toy in the world. And so all of a sudden, I'm lucky, right? It took a lot of false starts along the way. Talked to a lot of different companies. I told you about the time I wanted to manufacture it myself. When that didn't work, I started talking to other companies, toy companies, because I wanted to educate myself. I wanted to see how you take a toy idea from conception all the way to commercialization and having it in stores. And a lot of false starts. One company went bankrupt. I'm thinking, well, maybe it's not meant to be. Another one actually had one of my ideas and got it on the market, and it didn't succeed. And they never got the other one out of the model shop, which was the water gun. The first product I had on the market was actually a toy airplane, and the engineers in the company had designed it wrong with a fatal flaw, and it didn't work very well, even though my prototype was great. So just things went wrong, one thing after another, and that's what you have to deal with.
No, precisely. So you mentioned 8 years, basically.
Oh, yeah, 8 years.
Take us through that exact moment, if you can, when you realized that there was a child somewhere in this world, or maybe even an adult, like playing with something that you had actually imagined in your mind. Like, what was that? What did that feel like?
Oh, it was crazy. When Super Soaker became a huge hit, it was crazy. And it became a huge, huge controversy. And it was on the news, they were actually got banned in Boston. Literally, one of the politicians said they literally banned Super Soakers, and it was a huge movement, and it was such a rage that anything that happened became controversial. And some kids were playing with them, and someone shot someone with a Super Soaker. And they interviewed this kid in the hospital because they shot back with a real gun. And it was just crazy. Then I got a call from a reporter. Mr. Johnson, we're about to go to press with a report that Super Soakers are now being used in drive-by shootings. And before we did this, we want to see if you had a comment.
No.
And I'm like, and so I'm stuck, right? I'm like, what am I going to say? And all this controversy is going on. It could make a big difference. And I took this very seriously. And finally I said, I think we should have more of that. It would be better if everybody's using toy guns and shooting water and everything and having fun instead of shooting real guns at people. And that kind of diffused it. At one point, there was a cartoon that was published, and they had Uzis, AK-47s, and M16s, and all these other fully automatic weapons on one side of the cartoon, and they had Super Soakers on the other side. And the caption says, guess which one they're trying to ban?
Yeah.
It became a joke.
Exactly. Well, to that effect, if you could design a weapon for a sci-fi anime series, maybe one used by a time-traveling engineer. What would it look like? What would it do?
Oh, wow. If I could design a sci-fi weapon, geez, can you shoot intelligence into people? Can you shoot analytical thinking and just basic knowledge? You know, maybe knowledge is not enough because you got to be able to process it. Geez, because I mean, if you could get people to communicate and understand, I think we'd have a lot less issues and conflict in the world.
Yeah. No, for sure.
I don't know if you could do that, but maybe a brainwave. What do you think?
Okay, well, let's propose you had a magic wand that you could use with the U.S. education system. What would you redesign, like starting tomorrow?
Ooh.
Yeah.
What did I do?
He said fund the education system.
Geez, you know, this whole thing of education, I think right now it's so critical because change is happening so fast. And the implications are just so profound. We're emerging in a situation where you know, I remember Carl Sagan back in the day. Some of you may remember Carl Sagan, but he did the original Cosmos series. And he talked about how when humans created writing and reading and the ability to store information outside the human brain and be able to, that information would remain available in like a memory outside the brain that would be available for generations. Well, now we have computers that can do analytical things outside the brain, thinking and creating outside of our brain. They're writing their own code. They're doing things that for a long time we thought only human brains would be able to do. I can remember myself thinking that you'd never be able to have an autonomous vehicle that could drive itself because there's just you couldn't program a computer to do that, just too many variables. But the actual model that's used for AI is very similar to the model of the human brain. There's a framework, a model inside your head for the structure of the world, and then so what you perceive fits into that structure, and it's very similar to the way AI works. And so the fact that we are approaching a scenario where we're creating machines that will be able to remember things better than we can, analyze things better than we can. There's a lot to think about and a lot of things to prepare ourselves for, you know, especially when it comes to moral values and ethics and things like that. As we bring robotics online and things like that, and the productivity will go through the roof. You know, we talk about national domestic product and these kind of things, you know, how much goods and services we produce, where robotics will amplify all of those things. So there's going to be a lot more productivity in the world. The question is, all of the wealth that comes from that, how do you distribute that wealth in an equitable way? How does that impact quality of life, which is really the bottom line and really what drives what we do. So a lot of the models that have worked in the past may not be applicable in the future. We're going to have to figure all of those things out.
No, definitely. Thank you. So as you're talking, of course, I'm thinking about the path that you've forged, of course, beyond your invention and moving to the Johnson STEM Activity Center. Tell us a little bit about that and how you intentionally create spaces for others.
Well, you know, we started with the first robotics program, about 20 years ago now. And when I learned about this program, some of you may know, I'm sure a lot of you know about FIRST Robotics, no doubt. But it's a grade school program for kids building robots and having fun learning STEM and getting involved in STEM activities. When I found out about this program, I was like, I'm in, because of my experience building a robot when I was in high school and the impact that came with the self-confidence of being able to create things, envision things, and then turn your vision into reality. So when you think about that, the human brain is a pretty powerful thing.
Yeah.
You know, it is like magic because you have a vision, something exists in your head, and all of a sudden you can create it in reality. And you have these machines that do what you envision for them to do. To me, that's extremely powerful. So having a program where I can share that experience with other kids and help them realize how powerful this tool is between their heads that we all have, I think is very important because of what I was saying earlier about the problems that we're going to have to address going forward are going to be very, very challenging. And on top of the AI and the robotics, we've got the environmental impacts that we're having. All those things need to be addressed, and we need to have smart people, people with the confidence to take on tough problems to address those things.
Yeah, absolutely. So you guys, raise your hand if you think it's important that we give access to this generation to AI and coding and opportunities like that. Raise your hand if you think that's important. All right, great. Yes. Give it up, give it up. I want to draw your attention to the QR codes on either side. You can get more information, of course. Please pull out your phone so you can scan some information about the Johnson Activity Center. It's my job to give you access. It's your job to support and donate if you should be so inclined. And at this time, if it's okay, Dr. Johnson, I would love to be able to give some of these folks out here the opportunity to ask you a question if they would like. So if anybody is interested in asking Dr. Lonnie Johnson a question or comment, you want to come right over here to this standing mic, and we'll go for it. All right, let's get it going. First, go ahead. What's your name?
Hello, my name is, sorry, can everybody hear me? Are we good?
Yeah.
Okay. My name is Mandy. I have a very short story to tell, which does lead into a question. When I was in middle school, I had this extracurricular class that was like, how to be a better person, or, how to be a better person, or how to make the world a better place. And during Black History Month, we had an assignment that was like, write down, get into teams and write down a list of important Black people. So, we were using Google and we found your name. And we were like, inventor of the super soaker. He worked for NASA. Yeah, let's write him down. Our teacher didn't approve, and I'm still mad about it to this day. And look, I know a toy gun isn't on the same level as a GPS, but I want to know, do you feel like your invention is somewhat insignificant compared to other inventions? Because honestly, I think it's on the same level. I'm from Florida. I've gone to the beach a lot during my childhood, and that's like a really big staple. So I was really heartbroken when I heard that from my teacher, because I couldn't comprehend it.
Thank you for asking that question, actually. I could go on and on and on in response to that. I mean, there's just so many different aspects of why she may have discouraged you, but sometimes I think to myself, that, given some of the things that I've done, people ask me, for example, what do you consider your greatest invention, or what are your most, and people are surprised that, I don't have a favorite. Super Soaker is clearly right up there, but then after Super Soaker, for example, I wanted to be the king of all toy guns, and so I started redesigning Nerf dart guns. And I took Nerf dart guns to an entirely different performance level and presented that to Hasbro, and they actually did a deal with me. So the notoriety, the people hear about this lawsuit and so forth, that was about Nerf dart guns, and I probably made more money on Nerf dart guns than I did Super Soaker. So. And I had almost as many patents on Nerf dart guns as Super Soaker, but people don't know about that.
Yeah.
But, sometimes I think to myself when I look at what I'm doing now, for example, and, I worked on the Galileo's mission to Jupiter, and I have an invention on a spacecraft that went to another planet. If your teacher had allowed you to do the report on that, she may have learned about me inventing a power system for the Galileo space mission, one that my fellow engineers said wouldn't work at the time, and made it work, and some apologized to me for some of the things they said about my idea, but it solved a very important problem on that mission. Now I'm doing renewable energy technology, batteries that will give you twice the range in an electric car as a current Tesla's, which is about 300 miles. So this would be 600 miles on a single charge. Think about that.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your question.
Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Welcome. And come a little closer to the mic. All right.
Hi, my name is Ariel. I'm trying to condense the question inside my head. But as a parent, I try to incorporate 3 things within my daughter's life. 1, math, reading, and history. It is so sad that I pride myself on pretty much being history buff, and my friends pretty much was like, I bet you didn't know who was the creator of the Super Soaker. 3 years ago is when I found out about you. And I'm in my 30s. When I first looked you up, it said nothing about any of your creations. It just said everything about what you did within NASA. Being that is, how important do you feel it is to hardcore protect everything that you have done, everything that you have created? Because right now I have a fear, not just for you, but other Black creators, that in this time, we're just now finding out about a lot of inventions, even from the past, that were created by Black people. But moving forward, like, how hardcore do you feel as though it is for people who are inventors to hardcore protect their inventions and make sure that people know about them?
Well, you obviously will need to do what you can. You know, the patent system is there, take advantage of it. And people will, you know, the point you bring up is an important one, because people will tend to want to take credit for what you do. But also, you know, that my philosophy in life, my outlook on that is that, you know, so what? Deal with it, because you don't have a choice but to deal with it. You know, right now in politics, when we look at some of the things that are going on in the country, and some of the decisions being made, it's just downright disheartening for me personally. Some people may not see it that way, but that's the reality we have to deal with. And so my advice is to pursue with all vigor and energy and plan on winning, and deal with all the obstacles and setbacks and challenges that you're going to face, because you simply don't have a choice. If you're going to succeed, you got to deal with it.
That's great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next question. We're going to try to keep them as succinct as possible so we can get as many in. Thank you.
Hello, my name's Jordan Ritchie. I'm a physics PhD grad student at UCF. And I just have a question. While going through undergrad and your grad school career, and pretty much building your career as a fellow scientist and engineer and physicist in general, which, by the way, good job on the Galileo Cassini mission. I had a look at the Galileo data, very impressive. I just wanted to ask, how do you fuel that persistence when it comes to pursuing your career? Because I will admit, sometimes throughout my studies, of course, I get burnt out, like many grad students, of course. Like, hell, 50% of us are depressed and anxious, so.
Yeah. Your education is a tool. The knowledge that you put in your head is what you get to use. You can put knowledge in there by, you know, structured education programs. I think that's an efficient way of doing it because you're paced. But you can also do it by learning. I mean, a lot of what I use now and a lot of my is self-taught. I think probably the most important thing I learned in school, in college, was how to learn. You know, and so some of the staff members here will tell you that we pursue knowledge. You know, we read technical journals and publications so that we can stay abreast. You're not going to have an impact and take on the spit in the tiger's eye, so to speak, or take on big corporations if you don't know your game and you don't know the playbook. So you got to educate yourself. You got to pay your dues. Now, I will say that I spent close to 12 credits, come to think of it, because I took 4 classes toward my PhD, 2 at the University of New Mexico and 2 at UCLA while I was in the Air Force. And I burnt out. I was sitting there as, you know, I'm an inventor. I like to create things and And I was, doing some homework and thinking to myself, geez, these problems have been solved before. You're going through the textbook and they're showing you how to solve. I want to do things that solve problems that haven't been solved before. I just got impatient. So now I have an honorary PhD, so that's okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great question. All right, next up.
Hello, Dr. Johnson. My name is John Streeter.
Yes, I will autograph your.
Yes, sir. Yes, I'm a school teacher, fourth grade school teacher, and I'm also an honorary STEM mentor. And first of all, with this good, I got mine in, I guess, 1988 when I was in the fourth grade. So my parents got it when I was in the fourth grade from Walmart, and I saw it on a Nickelodeon, I think, one of the commercials. But my thing is can you think back when you were like in fourth grade or fifth grade at an elementary school level, and can you share with us what was a motivation or a motivational factor that brought you up to the point where you created a robot as a high schooler? What motivated you, or what inspired you as like a child, a 9 or 10-year-old?
This kind of goes back to one of the earlier questions about some of the discouragements that we experience as people of color in America sometimes. When I was growing up in the 60s in Mobile, Alabama.
Shout out to Mobile.
Okay.
It was pre-segregation. And when I was 12 years old, I remember it's when President Kennedy made his moon speech. And of course, by then I was already interested in science, and because I used to make my own toys, and it was just fascinating just curious about how things worked.
Yes.
And so this was pre-segregation, and I had teachers who nurtured my curiosity. I often tell the story about when I was interested in rocket fuel, and I went to the library and I found a recipe on making rocket fuel. And there are two incidents that stand out in my memory about that.
We don't have time.
Okay. One of them was when I was mixing rocket fuel in the kitchen and it caught fire and on the stove, because you had to heat it up to bond it together. And flames were shooting up, and my dad came home and said, you're gonna have to do that outside from now on, gave me a hot plate. So I didn't get punished. Same thing, my brother took some to school and lit it on the hallway, and we all ended up at the police station, they called it, and I'm sitting there scared to death, crying and thinking, they accused us of trying to blow up the school, and I'm saying, no. And I didn't even know it was the head brought it there, and so I felt very victimized. Anyway, I was trying to convince them it was just rocket fuel, not a bomb. And finally, they did the analysis, and I was all impressed. They came back and they actually said what the formula was and everything. I was like, wow, they reversed engineered and analyzed as a kid. I was all excited. And see, I told you it wasn't a bomb. You say, oh yeah, we have to change it to arson.
Thank you so much for your question.
But in the end, they called the teacher, and the teacher said, send them home. Right. So my curiosity didn't get stymied, fortunately, and if it had, I'd be a very different person here. So you bear with your children, bear with your friends, nurture the curiosity. I know it's tough, but that's what makes the difference.
Thank you, sir.
No, that was excellent. That was excellent. Hey, you guys, we in the interest of time, we have time for maybe 2 more questions, so make them good. And I do believe that Dr. Johnson is going to be willing to maybe sign that Super Soaker and take photos after we finish the presentation, correct, Dr. Johnson? Okay. All right, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Nate Wicker. I'm an undergrad student at Georgia Tech, and I'm very interested in the future of energy. And I wonder what you think the future of clean energy should look like, and what you and the groups that you're working with are doing to pursue that future.
I'll answer that one real quick. I'm going to try to be quicker and do
Yes,
better.
okay.
So I'm working on a new converter of heat to electricity, and we're focused on geothermal energy. our major investors in oil and gas companies have gotten on. So there are 20% of the abandoned oil wells in the country, there's low temperature heat, about 150 degrees and lower, and there's not an efficient technology that can convert that low temperature heat to electricity. I have an engine that's all solid state, no moving mechanical components that can work on low temperature heat, and just 20% of the abandoned oil wells in the country could supply all U.S. power needs. And that company made a major investor in us, and that's what I'm working on now. So in response to whether Super Soaker will be known as Super Soaker Inventor, and that's all maybe. Maybe. But thank you for the question.
Yeah, that's incredible. Come on up. Hey.
Hi, Dr. Johnson. My name is Nick. I work with video games, and I was wondering, as an inventor, how do you handle the job of having to be both a disciplined engineer, a creative artist, and also a salesman? Since oftentimes I think those three can be, you have to compromise.
And manage people and money, pay bills, salary. It's back to what I said before. You take on a challenge and you work the problems and issues as they come up. You stay positive.
All right, then. Come on up.
Thank you.
He's going to try to move quickly, so let's
All right,
you get you
yeah.
guys in. Thank you.
All right, hello, my name is Ray, and it's not a question, but I just want to make a statement for my friend who isn't here today, my friend Poodle. She wanted to let you know her favorite game is Splatoon, and she wanted you to know that it owes a lot of its existence to the Super Soaker and to you in general, and she wants to thank you for bringing her joy and to bring all of us joy with your inventions and your concepts.
Thank you.
Hi, Doctor. Thank you for your time. I've got a quick question. With the emergence of artificial intelligence and such, do you think we're ever going to come to the precipice to where we are gaining so much intelligence that our minds, our human brains won't be able to process it, and therefore the society will start to decline because while there's a lot of great information out there, we can't process it fast enough to move forward?
Just look around. It seems like we're already there. I mean, I've been cautioned to stay away from politics, so I can't.
And I didn't mean for it to be, but it just seems like that we are able to gain so much information.
Oh yeah, we've got more information. But what's interesting to me, whereas it was a time when you sit down and you want to do an analysis, now you can go to ChatGPT or something and just ask a question and they'll give you the answer and they'll do the research and it just appears there. So the rate of technology advancement, it was a hockey puck before, but it's just continuing to accelerate exponential. So yes, we're overwhelmed with information, and the challenge is when there's so much information is knowing what's real and what's not. Fortunately, in engineering principles, math, and physics, those are kind of firm. We can rely on those. But some of the other things that drive our decisions are more challenging to know what's real and what's not. And that, to me, is one of the biggest challenges, is how do we know when we've got sound information that we base our decisions on based on versus hearsay or ulterior agenda and information that people fabricate and put in front of us and provide as a rationale, which it happens. We see it in a very big way today.
Thank you.
That's a great question. Well, before we take the last question and turn things over to Millman of Radar Live, let's give it up for this gentleman's costume. You did that. You did that. All right, come on up. Tell us who you are.
It's fitting that Loki is last.
Okay, well, my name is Bradley. I'm a Tuskegee alumni myself, so from one alum to another, thank you. I also want to add that in 2006, my father sent me an article about you, and that's how I ended up at Tuskegee. So I guess my question is, how did you end up at Tuskegee, and how did that become your choice?
That's an interesting question. Oh, there was there are a couple comments, a bit of information rather that I should have shared with you. The robot that I built in high school won first place at a Southeast Regional competition held at the University of Alabama in '68, which was just a few years after Wallace had stood in the door and said no black students would ever attend this university. I didn't, even though I won first place, I was the only black student there. There were kids from all over the Southeast U.S. They didn't ask what my grades were. They didn't show any interest in me attending University of Alabama, so I didn't have that opportunity. And fortunately, I did not, because I really got a great education at Tuskegee, and found myself at Oak Ridge National Laboratory before going on active duty, and outperforming some of my peers who had gone to some of the major universities around the country. Penn State, for example, was my roommate, and it got to the point where he was not sharing information because he couldn't keep up with me. So I thought that was pretty cool. But I ended up at Tuskegee because Dr. Scavello, who was the head of the math department, had come down to my high school in Mobile on a recruiting trip and offered me a scholarship.
Wow.
And he was the head of the math department, and after I got to Tuskegee, I was majoring in math initially, then I changed my major to engineering, and he looked at me, but that scholarship was out of my budget. Anyway, he was cool with it, but yeah, that's how I ended up at Tuskegee.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Now, Dr. Johnson, before we move on, I want you to share with us something that has absolutely nothing to do with the Super Soaker STEM. Tell us something that very few people know about you.
Uh-oh.
Nothing to do with Super Soaker STEM or anything that we've talked about.
See, something that, well, I have 4 kids.
Okay, yes, you're in the midst of all of this, huh?
Happily married. My wife is Linda Moore.
Wonderful.
My oldest son said he was going to be here. I don't know if he made it. He may be since he's not standing up and waving anything, I guess he's not. But in any case, what do people, interesting thing about me that I talk about me all the time, so I don't know what it's.
Like, what do you do when you're not doing this?
I like sci-fi. You know, sci-fi is so important because that's the vision. And it's amazing how we can envision things and turn those things into reality. That's just, to me, powerful. I like to talk about, when I talk to kids, I talk about the human brain and how powerful it is. So back in the day, a few 100,000 to 2 million years ago, we picked up our first tool, was a rock, right? We used a rock. And my son, the one I was talking about, I told him, you know, the rock and the cell phone have a lot of things in common. He says, yeah, you can send a message with both of them. But no, the rock and the cell phone are made of the same materials. And I think that's just fascinating as hell. There's minerals from the earth, they're the same thing. But it took the human brain to turn rocks into cell phones. So we all have one. It's a very powerful tool. We have to be careful how we use it. We have to, you know, make sure we're putting good information in, so when we process and we get information out, it's not garbage. Because, you know, garbage in, garbage out. So we have to be careful what we put in our heads and how we program ourselves.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you for that. Dr. Johnson, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for reminding us that genius starts with curiosity, failure is part of the formula, and that play can power the planet. You are amazing, and the only Super Soaker Sensei STEM genius. We appreciate you, Dr. Lonnie Johnson. Give it up, everybody. At this time, we're going to call Mr. Melvin Breeden of Radar Live, who has powered this panel. So give it up for this gentleman who ideated this panel here.
2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2. All right, so you've heard about Eve Robotics that we host, that Dr. Johnson hosts at the center. So I want to first bring up the coach of Eve Robotics, Coach Akili. Y'all give her a hand clap. She's going to briefly tell us about, Eve Robotics. Then we're going to call up Mr. Donnie Beamer from the city of Atlanta to present them with something. Okay?
Hello, I'm Coach Akili, and I coach Eve Robotics. This is actually our 10th year since we started our platform. Initially, we had sort of like a junior varsity level, the first Tech Challenge level. We started that in 2015, and then in 2019, we started a varsity level team, and that's the girls that are here. And so Eve Robotics is an all-girl team. And actually, under my umbrella, I have 3 teams total. We do have a boys team. We have Atom Robotics, so our teams are Atom, ATOM, and Eve. And we meet at the Johnson STEM Activity Center. Very gracious of Mr. Johnson to allow us to be there. We're very grateful for that.
Okay, so we're going to call up Mr. Donnie Beamer. Let him say something from the city.
Well, thank you all for being here. And thank you, Dr. Johnson, because you are a living legend and one of my heroes. And how many people here are from or live in the Atlanta metro? Okay, a very good local crowd. All right, hands, you can clap for that. But and so I'm here from the Atlanta mayor's office, Andre Dickens. I serve him as your senior technology advisor. And so my mandate is to make Atlanta the best place for you to grow a technology company or create a new technology like Dr. Johnson. And so one of the things that's important about that is that access that he talked about. And so one of the things that I have to celebrate is not just the Super Soaker or the batteries, but he's created access and safe spaces for nerds like me and like you, right? And so back when I was your age, there weren't MomoCons, because we've been doing this for 20 years now. There weren't Johnson STEM activity centers. And so just like he didn't have a mentor, he didn't have someone to go to and have access to electronic computers because they didn't exist, but there are also people today that leverage his space to get access to AI and learn how to build robots. And so we want to enable him to do more of that. And so that's why we've got this big check. It looked bigger on the internet, but yeah. And so we want to give Eve Robotics $5,000 to support this season.
Can the Eve Robotics team come up? Y'all give them a hand clap while they make their way over here. Get them all in there. Get in there. All right, let's give them a hand clap, y'all. Thank you. There we go. Okay, so this concludes our panel with Dr. Johnson. Give him a hand clap. Again, you can donate to Johnson STEM Activity Center by scanning the QR code. If you wait around, you can wait and get a picture with Dr. Johnson and maybe ask some more questions. So we thank you guys. We got to get ready for the 3:30 panel, but we thank you. Enjoy MomoCon 2025.
Hello. Just so you know, if you have any girls that are interested in robotics, high school level, please see me.